Yeah, it's true.
Hey everybody, Breakthrough Health and Life Coach Glenn Haddam here. I am here with Kristen Brickle. She is a counselor here, a licensed counselor here in Boulder, Colorado. Works with folks in Boulder, Colorado and all over the world actually. And we're here today having a conversation on my rooftop with a beautiful view of the Flatirons in the background. And what a special day. We've been having a lot of wind here and lots of fires reoccurring. But the weather today is spectacular. And I'm excited about the conversation we're gonna have. We're gonna get into a little bit about Kristen and how she got in her unique career path and has been serving people at such a high level. She's had an enormous impact on myself and a number of people that I've referred to her as well. So without further ado, I just want to introduce Kristen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kristen, and I'm a licensed counselor here in Boulder, Colorado, for about 14 years now. And I serve people in our community in this lovely little sunny office in North Boulder, and then remotely all over the world. It's my pleasure. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I love what I get to do.
Yeah, maybe tell, I like to always travel back in time to figuring out what type of person you were and how you got on this unique path and arrived here, because you have a unique skill set and a unique way of looking at the world that has impacted me tremendously. And I know with your clients, when they come into the space to work with you, they're going through really, and oftentimes very challenging times in their life. And then there's an immediate trust and an immediate level of safety to be able to do the hard work and what's needing attention in their lives. And I think you weren't born into the world like this. You went through some unique life experiences.
Yes.
So.
Yes, it's true, right? Right now, I should say, in my practice, I'm working specifically with people in midlife, because I myself am in midlife, and my practice has evolved, if we rewind the tapes, as you say, from being the firstborn parentified child in a dysfunctional family. It was like I was destined to do this work, I think. And so it was interesting because as a sensitive person, as a sensitive child, I never missed a beat. And that experience of constantly being hypervigilant and walking on eggshells actually sort of led me to hone my ability to track the nuances of people, the adults in my life at that time. And I still use that skill today. And I coming into when I was a teenager, I was fascinated by energy work. I discovered exercise. Growing up in the Midwest, nobody moves their body, and so those were real awakening periods for me. And then my mom also got cancer for the first time when I was 16, which was really eye-opening as well, right? Like there's this, I'm coming into my self as a young woman, and then realizing the potential to lose my own mother, who I was very close to. And so she and I actually studied Reiki energy healing work together and went through all 3 levels. And that was really my springboard into, I think, all things self-help, all things psychology, all things meditation, mindfulness. I just took a deep dive after that time.
Yeah, and you've worked with some pretty difficult populations as well too throughout your career. So
right, yeah, it's true. When I first graduated from my counseling degree, I worked for 10 years in the addiction recovery world with court-mandated men in a treatment facility here in town, and it was the nitty-gritty I was looking for. It was the challenge. It also really grounded my skills in cognitive behavioral therapy and the process of change and what motivates people to change. That was really a time for me that felt like I got to uncover the science behind what I do and how the brain works and neurobiology, and that too I geeked out on because
maybe share a little bit about the messiness of that, because we often can articulate something really well now looking back at it, but it was hard work. You were doing some when I first met you, you were coming out of that phase, and very, very challenging work. And you always had a really strong practice of, before you got with clients, you really grounded yourself, and you were doing a lot of your own work at the time. And maybe share a little bit about some of circumstances that that really melded you? I'm sure there's maybe one. Everyone always wants a pivotal moment, and I don't believe there really are pivotal moments, but there are these moments that you can recall that really pushed you way out of your comfort zone.
Yes, I think that work was so much about meeting my clients' resistance. They didn't want to be there, they were court mandated, and my own resistance to looking at my own process at that time. I went through a tragic, unexpected loss. My boyfriend at the time died suddenly of a drug overdose, and that was such a pivotal moment in my life where I had to do my own self-examination, the next layer of it, if you will, and really reevaluate, I think, how I wanted to be as a clinician, how I wanted to be, in relationship with people in my life, in partnership. And so the dark times, though, the light always comes after the dark, right? Spring always comes after winter. And that season of my life felt like a hella long winter, right? We've all had the really long winters, but
I'm from California. You don't usually say hella in the Midwest, so.
yeah. So, but it was a profound learning, that period of time working with that population. I cut my teeth, so to speak, on just learning about human nature and especially addiction. And I think every single one of us has some addictive tendencies towards self-soothing that do not serve us. Whether it's too much wine at the end of the night, zoning out on our phones, affairs, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is. I see it now even in my practice.
Yeah, these coping mechanisms actually become our prison.
Totally.
And our denial.
Yes.
And so going back to you obviously developed a unique skill set and worked within the confines of a clinical type of environment and restrictions. And now your practice has evolved throughout the years to understanding that, okay, those were really great safeguards for doing a specific type of work, but there's probably this longing inside you of I really want to help people at the deepest level. And in order to do that in my own practice, maybe removing yourself from those restrictions, and then my experience is you tend to drop into your intuition and listen to what needs to happen in each unique session. Maybe share a little bit about coming from that space and having that clarity of I've got to do my own thing, and I want to be able to really help people in a powerful way.
Yeah, I love that. I love that question because, as I said, I was a sensitive kiddo. I had intuitive, auspicious experiences as a child, and then for that first 9-10 years of my career, I did shut that down for the most part. Or I'd get a hit about somebody. I have, some of the clairs. I see things, I hear things, I feel what somebody else is feeling. I sort of shut it down because it really wasn't welcome or useful, for that matter, serving court-mandated individuals. They needed skills before we did the process piece. Now in my practice, I definitely utilize that, and I think that's what makes my practice unique, is that I'll meet somebody for the first time, and instead of, let's go through the questionnaire, I want to learn about you, tell me about who you are, we sit, we get quiet, we breathe, and connect in, and I say, this is what I already see, this is how I already feel you, is this accurate? Am I getting you? Before they even say anything. And it's a magical experience, and I think expedites the process of transformation, of doing this therapeutic work, and in that way I think what I do is pretty rad, pretty special.
And I'm sure for a lot of women that really immediately this is a hit of yes, this is the right place for me, this is the right person to work with. How about some of the men that you've worked with throughout the years? Because myself, I was very sensitive and in tune, but society conditioned me to not express those aspects of myself. And only in coming into men's work over the last decade here, it was a recognition of, I knew something was off in our society about men just not really tapping into their feelings, following their intuition. We're kind of cut off and restrained from those inborn gifts.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're in midlife, right? You're in your 40s? ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
49 in June, baby.
right. So I think fundamentally our midlife period is between the ages of 40 and 65, and the fundamental mission in this period of time is to find our truth, to become our truth, like unabashedly, unapologetically step into the truth. And men specifically in midlife, at least what I see in my practice is that they're very misguided. They're lost. You guys are lost in some ways. And so my work with men in a lot of ways is like helping them peel back all the layers to harness that truth, head connected to heart, right? Versus my work with women in midlife is let's reopen the heart and then connect it back into the head a little. But most women are too heady. I'm guilty. And most men are also living up here. And then we get cut off from the heart place.
And what happens in our decision making process in our life, the choices, the options that we have when you are cut off from your heart space? Because we think, okay, here's the logical way, and I need to, in the corporate jobs or in being single moms, there's this level of responsibility and certain things that have to be in integrity for the day to work. But when you're cut off from your heart, or the connection of, for me as a man, it's like my head, my heart, my balls, all those things connected.
Yeah.
Trusting my gut instincts, listening for my own self-validation. What can happen to someone in their choices and options? Because we were talking earlier about how we can go to coping mechanisms, and we can justify them. They're needed, but we don't realize how much of life we're missing out on because we're just focused on, through a limiting filtering system, these are my only options, and we're missing out all this splendor here because we're being guided by, well, this is just how it is and what I need to do. And when you get locked into that mode and modality, you're not only restricting your health and vibrancy, but maybe just talk a little bit about that, because you get to witness, in a certain sense, people waking up to their highest vibrational energy and expression of their self. I know for me, my not expressing fully my truth would lead to throat cancer at some point here.
Right. The body speaks, right? Yes, what you're describing is what I call manage and maintain, and it's prolific. It's everywhere in midlife for most people. The manage and maintain of paying the mortgage, raising the children, dealing with empty nest syndrome, sick parents, divorce, all manner of curveballs that life throws at us. And our brains are wired to rehearse emotions. We memorize emotional patterns, and what happens over time is we don't question that. We just go, well, this is how it is. This is the reality of my life. I'm not sure what I can do. And then we dump more negative self-talk, criticism, melancholy, depression, anxiety. And then we self-soothe, right? People reach for the alcohol, the whatever, all the self-soothing,
even sweets and overeating,
sugar, all of it, right?
Yeah.
And so how do we disrupt that is what your question is. How do we,
how do we come in contact with what that part of ourselves that we're disconnecting from with those distractions, those disassociation methods?
Right. So I think there's a real pandemic of people not being in their body and not being free to really experience themselves in their body, just as a basic fundamental, right? So then we're talking about state. So our state is our physical, mental, and emotional sort of status, if you will. And so one of my first questions to people is always, tell me about your movement patterns. Do you move your body? We live in Boulder. A lot of people do move their body, but it's often in this linear plane. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to lift weights. Everything's sort of in this linear plane. And I'm going to wax woo-woo for a little bit here, but I want to hear more about nonlinear movement patterns. When we move our bodies in nonlinear ways, so we can go dancing, we can, go and hike and then lay down. We can just practice other ways of moving beyond this sort of dimension that we've created. We wake something up in ourselves, I think.
I find that when I just earthing, when I just go to the park and just take my flip-flops off and get my feet
Yes.
into the grass.
Right, inviting,
Or spin in circles, do silly things,
Just-
whatever.
That's a piece of it, right? So state, right? So what's happening in our state physically, emotionally, and mentally? How are you talking to yourself on a day-to-day basis? That's another question, right? That I like to examine with people. And then there's this big piece around permission. I think many of us, especially in midlife, who are stuck in manage and maintain, we don't give ourselves permission anymore to be silly, to be ridiculous, to play, to find our pleasure. We just shut it down, and so many of us are just living from our heads. And so that's a huge.
I've been guilty of being too serious at times. It's very business focused.
Yeah, so I get curious about that too, right? Like I'll invite clients in the office, for example, or even over Zoom. I'm like, let's stand up, right? Let's stand up and even ditch the notion of what therapy and talk therapy looks like. And even that makes people uncomfortable. And then we're in an experiment where we're connecting again in your body to something that feels like it's awakening up, that's alive and uncertain. And our rehearsed pattern is often to go to concern. And I want to invite you into curiosity.
Right.
Yum. Curiosity. Like that's the energy. That's the stuff right there.
Well, let's go back to experiment. So use the word experiment. We've been in a social experiment with COVID times. And you've witnessed from the calls and the people that show up in your office of now, we're coming out of this period now, but the cost of all, you've witnessed all these couples that have been in lockdown for the last couple of years, and even though there's freedom and people are coming out of COVID times and getting out and going to concerts and doing stuff, there's been a disruption, in our society, and even in Boulder, where people are, it's one of the healthiest places to live, very health conscious and fit and active. There's been the climate has changed in one's household, and not just the rearing of kids, but the way couples have to, working from home and having to engage more than you want to around difficult subject matters. Like the subject matters are like right here and now, not just the landscaping needs to get done and get fixed up, but actually the landscape of the way we've kind of taken certain things for granted and neglected in our relationship. Maybe share a little bit about what you've experienced or witnessed with where there's been some patterns of turmoil. Like I said, it's kind of, we've been in the endemic, but there's a whole nother pandemic that's going on in relationships.
Absolutely, and we're all cut off. Again, I think it's too much living upstairs, as I call it, in our heads. And couples generally fight about mess, they fight about money, they fight about sex, they fight about parenting, they fight about time. Those are the 5 big things that most couples fight about. And when we get stuck in these arguments, these disagreements, and they last for more than a day, I want to give you guys this tip. If you can't resolve the conflict, within an hour or two, even within a day, it's always an indication that there's a historical conflict happening there and not a contemporary thing. It's not that you put the toilet paper on the wrong way, right? It goes much deeper than that if we can't resolve it in the moment. So when couples come in, or individuals that are parts of, a couple come in and start talking to me and explaining these dynamics, that's one of the things I'm always assessing for is what's your recovery rate in moving through that conflict, right? The other piece of what you're describing is, everybody spent too much time together. Our kids, we're sick of our kids, they're probably sick of us, I'm sick of the partner, right? My spouse. So there's 3 tenets I always talk to people about that have to be present. And it's the simplest distilled down version, but honest, fun, and hot. Honest, fun, and hot in relationship, especially long-term relationships. And if you don't nurture that, honest communication, full transparency, fun, let's play together, let's go shoot some hoops, let's go throw the frisbee together, right? And hot, we all know what hot means, right? Hot. Because everything is on a polarity. All of this energy, especially in relationship, happens on a polarity. And when we spend too much time together, there is no polarity. Do you feel that? It's like it's gone flat.
I can't miss them if they're right there all the time.
All the time, right? And so that's what happened over these last 2 years is so many of us spent so much time together that the polarity went away. And when the polarity's gone, the energy's flat. And when the energy's flat, it's all these things that we've been talking about.
And if one of those three things goes out, it interrupts the rest.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, that whole analogy of the garden, like who's going to go out and water the garden today? Who's going to weed the garden today? Of course, relationships are difficult and require paying attention on purpose in a meaningful way.
Everybody's got to do their work. And also a big part of work is, okay, the historical piece of this is that maybe what's coming up for me in relationship with my partner or even someone I'm dating has to do with me.
Yes.
And if I can come to the relationship from a place of full responsibility and willing to be curious to look in there and allow them to be curious with
Right.
me,
Yeah.
we can probably be in a healthier communication dynamic and find resolve versus we're out here trying to get the other person to behave differently. Having made that
Yes.
mistake myself.
Absolutely. I'm guilty too, right? Like, I think so many of us do that. We look for the right person. Like, surely he's out there, she's out there, right? This right person. And it's that idea of how do we make the relationship right together, right? Like that's the work. How do we pay attention on purpose in a meaningful way and take inspired action towards honest, fun, and hot to make the relationship right and thrive?
Well, this work seems very juicy, and I'm curious, how would our audience get a hold of you, Kristen? How would they find you?
Great. Yeah, great question. On my website, KristenBrickel.com, you can find everything you need to know. I'm also on all the social media platforms at Kristen.Brickel, Brickl. Everybody wants to add an E. There's no E. But yeah, that's
I'm
how.
guilty. Great. Well, if you're interested in working with Kristen or just learning a little bit more about, I know you've got a lot of, I think you have some blogs that you've done and posts that are very informative that if someone just wants to stalk you for a while and learn a little bit about your offerings, they can find a wealth of information there too. So.
Yes, there's a lot of things I've written up there, and then I'm right now in collaborating at the beginning stages with another woman to be able to offer some sessions this summer, a series of 6 around specifically looking at state and story and strategy, but as it relates to movement practice in conjunction with this therapeutic sort of piece to do the two together and hopefully outside. So we'll see. That's what I'm working on right now. So
I'm excited. Well,
Yeah.
I just want to thank Kristen and thank you for listening in, and hopefully you'll have the courage to step up and just reach out to have a conversation with Kristen and see if there's maybe a great fit there and the work speaks to you. I hope this has been helpful, and I just want to say thank you for being here today, listening in, and we'll see you at the next episode.
Yeah,
and
thank
we'll
you.
invite you again, of course, because we'll go into some more content, of course. There's
Yes.
just so much there. So,
right on.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.